Marie, and I am happy to be here with Carissa, Anthony, and Maddie as my co-hosts today. How you guys doing?
Doing great.
Good,
Yeah,
good.
Excited.
yeah. Spring is here officially today,
Yeah.
and birds are
Yeah, it
singing
looks
and the
like it.
sun is shining. It's a beautiful day.
Yeah, it
Um,
is.
I think that it would be super awesome if we maybe chatted a little bit about generational trauma. Do you guys know about generational trauma?
Definitely. Oh, yeah.
Just a little bit.
I'm new.
A little bit.
I just barely myself learned about it last year.
Really? And what did you learn?
I learned that it's the reason why I am the way I am. I learned about it I think I had seen something in social media, TikTok, Instagram, one of the platforms talking about generational trauma, and I'm like, okay, well, I understand generational. Where does the trauma come in? And I'll give you an example. My grandmother raised me. She also raised me to be hyper independent based off of her life experiences. And yes, it was a good thing. She became that way out of some negative experiences. Well, because of that, she passed that on to me. She was just like, Carissa, you're the only person you can count on. You can't count on nobody but yourself. You have to work. You have to make good money. You have to make enough money to take care of yourself. It's just number one, right? And made me hyper independent to the point where I'm uncomfortable asking for help. I hate asking for help.
That's a
And
good thing right there.
that's a really good example of generational trauma. And after my grandmother sharing her stories with me and what she experienced in life, her first husband, my biological grandfather, was in the Navy, and he was away at sea, and he didn't send home any money. She's far from Southern California and living in Rhode Island. No family, no friends, and she had to work to put food on the table and a roof over her head for herself. Because of that soul experience, her daughters and boys were doing their own thing, but I don't know why she instilled that in me.
So, did you pass that generational down, or did you? For myself, I grew up that way too. I grew up in a way where it was very old school, hard work, and you don't leave a job until you have another job in line. You just don't do that, right? But my family was so old school. It was very hard in the sense of cold, detached, not inviting, and sometimes in a kid's perspective, downright mean. So I did grow up like you with those morals and values and ethics, but I vowed not to raise my child that way.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think? Like, or did you have an aha moment where you realized while you were raising your child? For some people, it was when they were raising their children. For me, I worked with children before I ever had children. And I learned a lot working with other people's children. And
I didn't have that aha moment until last year. And you know that old saying, I wish I would have known then what I know now. I most definitely would have instilled a lot of other things in my son. Anthony has really good examples of work ethic from not only myself, but his father. So I feel that's something that we passed on to him was just that hard work, that work ethic, and but I think I would have done things 100% different. But I didn't have those aha moments. All I could do was just work, That was my persona for so many years, was working and making sure that I got a better job every single time. My grandma's like, you have to level up. Any new job you get, you better make sure you're getting more money, more money. And that was coming from her, who was coming from a place of financially struggling,
Survival mode.
survival mode. So
Yeah.
I mean, there's, and another thing too is there's a lot of things in our family that attributes to generational trauma. you know um Communication. My grandma was like, always just sweep it under the rug. We don't talk about it. We just turn the other cheek, sweep it under the rug. Don't worry about it. It'll solve itself. Don't worry about, so that's
Secrets.
another, yeah. So
Secrets.
yeah, so it's like, it's been probably, like I said, like last year is when I just became aware of the generational trauma. And how do you work through that? I Being almost 50 years old, I have a grown son. Like, of course you can always change going forward. You can definitely change. Just because you start off in this life with going through a rough patch and whatnot, doesn't mean that you can't end it lovely and smelling like roses. You can break that cycle. You break that generational trauma.
Yep.
It starts with you. My son, it'll even be more so with him. He's gonna have it's like fine tuning, right? Once it's realized, once it's recognized, like, hey, we're repeating this pattern for generations.
Mhm.
It's got to stop somewhere. Let's not do this.
That's why I think this generation in general, you know, I think self awareness is so important because you just stated yourself, you've lived your life until now where you realize that it was passed down to you. It isn't just, it wasn't even a thing until you had your moment where you're like, you woke up and you're like, oh, that's what's been happening. Um, what do you have to chime in on that, Anthony? So you are like the next generation. What do you think as far as like, looking like from your perspective, looking back to your grandmother, who you have a different relationship than with your mom, right? Looking back, and looking at your life, like how do you attune to? Do you feel like it at some level, affects you, or do you feel like maybe generational trauma in other areas? Like, just share with us like your perspective.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I was a very intellectually inquisitive mind as a young child, so I paid attention to everything. Um, Became very aware of my father and his shortcomings and what his habits and what his ways amounted to. I learned a lot of what not to do by my father. So similar to you and you realizing, no, I don't want that. I did have a lot of those realizations as a child, on both sides of my family. But I definitely, over the last 4 years, since the birth of my son, definitely came into a lot of realizations and, being introspective. I've always been very introspective, reflecting on what I've done, why my past choices have amounted to this. Your current state is a reflection of your past thoughts. And I've understood that for a very long time. So, in witnessing the trauma, I became very conditioned to it and it was very normal. I have a very, very, very different perspective on it. I'm not as shocked or wowed by things as many people might be, if I were to give the full grand layout of the experiences that I've had. But yeah, I saw it on both sides of my family. It definitely affected me and I absolutely absorbed some of them and I had to definitely correct them and change them. But yeah, it definitely did get passed down. I this is my great grandmother that we're talking about that really instilled this, and I witnessed it firsthand too. It wasn't. I was the little 7-year-old boy also witnessing my grandmother talk about these things as well. That same 7-year-old boy that could see that the things my dad was doing is not what I wanted to do, and I definitely would never do my son how my dad did me. That was something that's been ingrained in my core since I was a little boy. The things that my father did to me, my son will never experience. So much like you saying that I will never raise my daughter like that. I fortunately got to have that realization at that age, but I know there's a lot of people that don't, because I understand that there's other generational trauma that I have absorbed, that I did absorb, that carried along right into me. Like coming from where we come from, like drug addiction is a very big thing. It's trying to bury the sorrow, bury the pain, bury the inability to face the reality, to be at peace with yourself, to accept this. Like that's like my mom said, shutting up, being quiet. It'll just deal with it. That's how you deal with it. No, like that's going to lead to just some horrible ways of dealing with that as an outlet. Like your outlet is not going to be good when you don't understand how to navigate that water.
Right.
And I think generationally, it's taken my mom and me to really break that, realize it. Like I said last week, my mom was a very, very big pillar for my spirituality. I already was, but strength of there being more, an ability to do more, came from my mother witnessing that. And that was in, my great grandmother, the same person that sat here and told us to sweep all that shit under the rug, to not let it get you down, that you have to be, people pleasing, you need to get ahead. She was really the first generation Mexican American here, so assimilating to the country, to the culture, to not be an outcast, to get ahead. I get it. I understand. Who am I to judge somebody in that time? I could imagine putting myself in my grandmother's shoes in the 50s, trying to navigate this country. Probably wasn't a very nice place for her, and she had to do a lot of things to survive. So I can understand the pathology behind her thinking and how society impacted her to have to do those things.
You
But
just triggered a big thought. You just
yeah,
you said something. Uh, because I can picture you're both Hispanic culture. Is your father also Hispanic?
no, he's
So,
white,
so
Irish and German. Like my beard in the sun is red tint, like as white as
Oh
white can
yeah.
be. Yeah, as white as white
so
can be.
You triggered.
just to circle back, my grandmother, her mom and dad. So let's add another layer of generational trauma.
Yeah,
My grandma Diane's dad was Spaniard and Native American. So my great grandparents were born in California. So they've been in California for a very, very long time. And then, so add that Native American trauma on top of that. My great grandfather actually was sent to an Indian school. Him and his six brothers were sent to an Indian school in Riverside, California, the Sherman Institute, to essentially become domesticated. Even though their dad was Spaniard, their dad, who was Spaniard, stole their mother from her tribe in Central California and then brought her down to the Riverside area. And by the time her tribe had found her, she had already, was
assimilated.
pregnant, had a couple kids. So, we have to factor that into it too. So,
Yeah, I get you. Wow. So you have both sides there. Myself, I'm full Portuguese, Bay Area, California. But my grandfather and his brothers were produce men, and they grew up in the fields in Bakersfield, with produce, and that's hard work right there. And he
Hmm.
met my grandmother, I think, in either Bakersfield or Salinas, and she had a different life. I think she dreamed of leaving the hard life and hoping that by being with my grandfather, because he had the businessman like mentality, even though it was more of a survival mode mentality.
Yeah,
She seemed to end up regretting being with him. And, him and his brothers, they got this big potato company. It was called Circle S. And they were in all the grocery stores in California growing up. And his brother even had a produce stand inside of a market inside of Oakland. And one day, Hayward, California, right behind the BART station, my grandpa
yep.
had his warehouse my whole life. And my grandma picked me up from school in her little tiny red Mustang with the hard top, and she tried to, it was all about money with the Portuguese people, and I couldn't stand that, and I didn't get it. I get it now. I understand, right? That it was because they didn't because of survival. But she was walking me in to the warehouse, and it's dirty in there. It's just hardcore, just dust and dirt and cold, and she said something to me. She was bitching about my grandfather, and she goes, I wish I never married that man. And she thought I could have had a whole different life. And I thought, and I'm like 10, maybe 11, and in my mind, I'm like, you wish you married somebody else? That means I wouldn't be here. That means, and me in my mind, that means you don't love me because you
Exactly.
want
It's like rejection. Yeah, absolutely. I can understand that.
Yeah, it broke my heart.
Mm-hmm.
And that put something in my trauma response of that money isn't gonna bring you happiness. Like I learned through her that here she thinks money is gonna bring her happiness, and it would eliminate me, like that whole So to me, money has never been what it was generationally. Like I won't pass that on to pass that on to my kids. But you said something out from wrote it was, but you really triggered that whole how we affect our children.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was talking with one of my friends yesterday. I said, I didn't inherit generational wealth. I inherited generational trauma. Like, I feel like that should be a shirt or a bumper sticker, right? Why couldn't I get generational wealth?
Yeah. Trust fund of generational trauma.
Right?
Yeah. I'll get my Cricut out and make it for you.
Done. Yes.
Yeah. But like the thing about, being psychoanalytical of myself and being introspective, like trying to place myself in my great grandmother's shoes and what she did, but as I became a man, being able to do that with my father, because I had so much animosity and so much anger and hatred for my dad for a lot of the things that he did and continued to do. But I also had to, remove myself. What was he working with? My grandfather, just another outpour of generational trauma. My grandfather's dad, my great grandfather, was an adopted little Irish boy. 5'3", feisty little redhead Irish boy. And he didn't have really any identity. He was just adopted by a family in Oklahoma, and he met a woman and had my grandfather, but made my grandfather's life hell. My grandfather was born with a very rare form of Tourette's and couldn't control it. In the 50s and the 60s, they had no idea about different types of neurodivergency, different functioning of the brain, ADHD, Tourette's, depression, just very, very ignorant and unaware of what our brains can do. So my great grandfather put a bottle in my grandfather's hand at 14, 13, told him to drink because it's a Tourette syndrome that creates severe nervousness. My grandfather constantly lives in a state of 95% anxiety. You can make him angry or have some stress placed on him, and then that puts him at 100%, but he's in a constant fight or flight. He's in constant survival mode, and that's without anything. That's just how his body works, and his body is triggered that way. So he had a father that, just put a bottle in his hand at 14, told him to drink because it would slow down the Tourette's, the shakes, anything he had, it would calm him. So my grandfather became an alcoholic at 14 because if he did have any of his fidgets, or if he had a twitch or anything, he would get smacked. He'd literally my great grandfather would just beat him, so that was a big part of what led my grandfather to be an alcoholic. So that is what my dad was dealing with. It's another outpour of generational trauma going on and on and on. So being introspective to it, though, and being able to place yourself in somebody else's shoes really allowed me to have a lot of empathy and a lot of understanding, and not be so hard on that person, essentially, not being so hard on myself, seeing myself in them too, because I know I absolutely have absorbed those things, and I've probably gone through my life affecting people in a way that I wasn't aware of, just like them.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. What were you gonna say, Matt?
Same thing he's saying. My grandfather was uh, my great grandfather. My grandmother's dad, great grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
He was a hobo. He was a hobo. He wandered
Yeah.
around. He was an alcoholic. He hid alcohol around the house. He was uh, just really, really bad. And then take a generation later, and the generation later is my dad, and my dad's a bad alcoholic, but more functional because he's been very successful in his life. But bring it down to us, and my brother is a huge alcoholic. I'm an alcoholic, but highly functional. But it just generationally that has come down through our DNA. It wasn't
Absolutely.
activated in me.
Absolutely.
It was my brother activated at 16, almost like 14. You know,
Yeah.
my brother
Mm-hmm.
was hiding, getting older friends to buy him 12 packs, and he stored it in his closet. And
Because it was
it hit
learned. It's
me.
something he saw. Something he saw.
Yeah,
That literally
You know,
that's it. It's sad. Yeah.
yeah,
you
yeah.
just said something you saw, something you learned, right? You both said that. Like, and even Carissa, when she was on, she was talking about what it was said, what wasn't learned in survival mode. But, I think generational trauma can be invisible as well, to the point where it goes back to maybe history that you don't know. My dad's mother was an orphan in Mission San Jose in
Mm.
California, and her and her siblings were left there. I don't even know the story behind how they ended up being an orphan in the mission, but she was like 16 or 16, I think, and my grandfather met her and married her so that she could leave the orphanage at the mission, and she passed away of a tumor or breast cancer. I don't recall which. When my dad was only 5, so he didn't even really know. So here we are, and that generational trauma, maybe even from what her family, however she ended up in an orphanage, went through to get to where they were, is hidden in our DNA. And even further back, like when we look at history and we look at the Dark Ages, or we look at history and we look at like the Roman times when they were just so brutal, right? And gaps in history where we don't know anything, but the
Mm-hmm.
DNA line is still there,
Mm-hmm.
and our DNA, I mean, we look at, the gene, the spiral and all of that DNA that's in there, and some of it is junk DNA and not really necessarily activated, but like, what did, bring us to it? Is it all learned? It kind of goes back to the nature nurture kind of thing. Is
Yeah,
it in our
yeah.
nature? Because it's in our DNA, and so it therefore is our nature. Like some cultures, may tan well, and some cultures may burn, but with that comes with where their culture was at one time, and what their culture went through to adapt to that environment, right? And so as it trickles down to where we are now, we have tons of different DNA. Of course, we are associating with predominantly what we were raised around, our immediate, maybe last 3, 4 generations, right? But we have generations out there in our DNA that may not even be anywhere near what we actually are. You know what I mean? So that is in us too. So it's amazing if we were to pull that thread and really look at like what created us in the here and now.
Yeah.
Like I
So,
wonder.
so I'm so excited you're talking about this because in my research, I discovered that there is a name for that. It's called epigenetics. And it's the study of how your behaviors and environment can cause changes that affect the way your genes work. It doesn't necessarily change your DNA sequence, right? That little thread and all those little structures that we see. It doesn't necessarily change that sequence, but it can change how your body reads the DNA sequence. So, for example, how it
Oh,
reads it, it
pulls.
doesn't
Yeah.
change your DNA makeup at all, but it will add What does it? I'm trying to
The computer is
recall.
uploaded with specific information, but it's pulling it in a specific manner. It can't change the information or the root of it, but how it receives it or pulls it. That absolutely
Perception.
makes sense. Yeah, because
Oh,
you're already given it. You're
yeah.
already you enter this place with it. You know what you were saying, Lori, like, yeah, maybe it's just in you innately and you don't understand why you can do certain things. A talent or a gift, you might be ignorant to think that you haven't absorbed some bad things. Maybe some of that trauma is there's something in your DNA that allows you to excel at sports, but there's something in your DNA that also is generationally so deep and rooted in a specific trauma that you
That
don't
you just
understand
learn.
why you have a connection to that, why
Yep.
you yourself haven't experienced it, but you can understand, like, why do you relate to something so deeply, because that's maybe way deeper in the family tree, way back there, like
Yeah,
you're
like
saying.
serial killers. Like when you look at and from an astrology perspective, and from a DNA from all the different perspectives, when you look at like what makes up a serial killer, and some of them have like great lives early on,
Yeah.
or at least that's what it appeared, right?
Hmm.
Great parents, loving parents, secure, attached parents. But what innately came out of that child that they naturally felt okay with murder? You know what I mean?
Hmm.
You're right. It could be tucked away in there,
Five
and
generations, six generations back, grandpa might have done some really dark things that we don't know about, because in that time they didn't have the
Yep.
DNA analysis or the crime scene investigation that they can do now. So grandpa got to go under the
Yeah.
radar 200 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
killing,
Yep.
and that's
Mm-hmm.
I could see a serial killer in that moment, why they do it. They're getting a thrill out of it. It's triggering something in them. It's embedded into the DNA. They're getting a hit of dopamine. It's doing a bunch of
Yep.
chemistry on them that's going to be
yeah,
implanted into it. And in turn, like you're saying, yeah, why is it so just normal without being normal? Has to be that.
yeah. Like where did it come from? Right? Totally. Yeah, I had a thought and it went away, but it was a good thought, so I hope it comes back.
I hate when that happens.
Yeah, I hate it when that happens too. Keep talking so I can try to
Yeah.
remember. Matt, tell us a little bit about your culture and where you're from.
My culture, where I'm from,
Yeah, like
man, Germany is
what
my dad's mother's side. But a little bit of Irish. I don't know. I'm not really sure.
you both have Irish.
That's all
Have
I know.
either one of you read Angela's Ashes?
No.
Okay, so Anthony, if you identify well with your culture, and Matt, if you identify well with the Irish culture, I highly recommend you read Angela's Ashes. And I learned, I'm not big on, there's people that really enjoy reading about and enjoys the wrong word because it's not an enjoyable thing, but the
Yeah.
Holocaust, like, diving deep into that. But like with the Irish culture, something brought me to that book years ago, and it's about a little boy who grew up in Ireland, and how insanely rough it was. I mean, like in the 20s, 20s and 30s,
Yeah. It said it was during the famine.
and then they came to New York. Like just about everybody, right? How they
Hmm.
migrated to New York, and it was how he went from that survival mode to bringing that survival mode to here, and
Mm.
how he grew up with his father who went to work and was an alcoholic, and how and even in Ireland they lived with fleas and lice, and his mother's name was Angela, and anyway, I don't want to give a lot away, but I learned so much about how rough it was way back then in another culture, but that culture was brought over here to a whole new world where at that time, there was still a lot of native culture that, like Carissa was saying, that was overtaken by the religion and what's the right way to be, when really they had it much more right than any of us had it because they lived much more naturally, and in sync and in tune with the earth and whatnot. But just even if you just Google it, and just like get a little like read on it, I think you both would. But it was really good. I think they even made it into a movie. I know that they did make it into another book where it followed up with him being an adult, and what his life even as an adult, and that trauma and how it trickled down. But it was so detailed. Somebody's phone, I think, is giving off notifications. So it was so deep that I think that you'll find something in that will kind of
Definitely, yeah. I pulled it up real
catch you.
quick. That time just in general was that was some real shit that they had to endure and go through. And I could have made, like, yeah, bringing it, like you said, bringing it here. How many timelines now have been affected by something brought here based off of that
Right.
exact thing? Because I could say, a lot of people are in the survival mode, across so many different groups of people, past color, just groups of people that don't even realize that they're in a survival mode, but they clearly are in it. They don't understand why. So
Do
that would
any of
explain
you
it.
ever have a nostalgic? Do any of you ever have a nostalgic calling to a time in history, or an era, or well, that would be a time in history,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
something that is totally outside the box? You weren't raised with it,
Ri-
because
ri-
for me, I really have no desire whatsoever to go to New York, um, or to my thing is not connected, so I don't know like what kind
You
of.
are. No, you're good. You're still
yeah,
uploading.
yeah.
Okay. So I have this calling, and it's really interesting. I feel called to like New York in like maybe the 40s, but very Christmas, snowy, nostalgic. So like when I listen to Christmas music, like old school, or
Mhm.
when Christmas is around, I feel like drawn to that era, that time period, and I know that it. And I'm really good at knowing how I know people in other timelines. It's just when I have patterns in friendships where oh, I know them from this timeline, I know this from that timeline, this era, that era, because certain things like trigger patterns where like I know I have people that I've known through a military lifestyle where in far off history, and I know people where it was a tropical lifestyle, or maybe we were like islanders, or something of that nature. But I don't relate to a timeline where it's, and that's why I asked you if anybody has a nostalgia for like that, because I don't relate to ever living in New York, or and maybe it's just very deep in my subconscious that I don't remember that timeline. But do any of you have any kind of odd nostalgia that you feel like drawn to and you don't have any idea why? Could that be in our DNA, or is like what do you think about that?
I for
Medieval
sure have
times,
a.
Renaissance.
There you go.
Say that again.
Let's hear you, Matt.
No, medieval times, like the Renaissance. Like I know I was in the Renaissance. A creative like outburst of creative
Yeah, I could
energy.
I,
I
I
know.
could see it,
I know
man.
what
I
time
could
it is.
see it 100%, Matt. Like
You know?
it almost like it was so strong in that life that it pours out in this life.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yep.
yeah. Like
And I brought people.
yours is
And
maybe
I
a little
brought
bit more
people.
direct.
Yeah, I brought people in from that life. I know my love of my life, my best friend when I was like a teenager. I wrote a story for her in high school, an article of the Renaissance woman. I read it for her, because she just inspired
Shakespeare,
me so
man.
much.
How's
Yeah.
Shakespearean of you to do that? Like you. That's crazy that you relate to that, connect to it, but like your physical form in
Mm-hmm.
this life is it's embodied it. It was so strong.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, whatever happened in that life was profound.
I believe so. Definitely.
What
Yeah.
about you? What about you, Anthony?
Yeah. What about you?
Yeah, a couple. Egypt for sure. I can't pinpoint it
Yes.
all, but like for sure, absolutely in ancient Egypt. I don't know what
Definitely.
timeline there, but for sure,
Yeah.
ever since I was a small
Definitely.
child, an innate connection to it that I can never explain. That now as an adult I understand, and as I've gotten deeper into my spirituality and awareness of self and how all this stuff works, yeah, without a doubt, I couldn't. couldn't understand what my obsession was with it at such a young age. I was a kid. I shouldn't have been that obsessed with it. I know now why it was that. But
My first
also,
tattoo was the Eye of Ra, and I didn't even know what it meant.
yeah,
I didn't even know what it meant.
wow,
I knew that it was big and it was important and it was part of me, and I remembered it without remembering it. And
yeah, exactly,
and I was like, and people would ask me what it meant, and I didn't know. I
yeah.
just knew that it was spiritually important.
A magnetism, a
Yeah.
pull and draw to it that I can't explain. That's the best way to describe it. Where yeah, just
Yep.
a fascination with it, and then also I don't know if it's like Olmec, Aztec, or Mayan, but something in Mexico, somewhere in Central America,
Mm-hmm.
in that
Yeah.
time frame, But also my
Yeah.
roots here are rooted in Mexico as well too. So I wouldn't be surprised. I have a timeline. I'm almost that one. It's not as like solid as Egypt, but man, there's a few experiences as to why that one I know. There's a few things that have happened in this life that have pulled me to that one. But yeah, for sure Egypt, and then another one in that time frame of
I can
you
feel
know
Mayan off of you for
Mayan,
sure.
Aztec, it could be Olmec,
Mm-hmm.
something down there, Incan, something of that,
Mm-hmm.
an empire down there in Central America, Mexico, somewhere there for sure.
What about you, Carissa? Do you have a weird nostalgia that you can't really quite explain?
Absolutely. New Orleans. I know I was a
Uh,
pirate in New Orleans.
New Orleans is
I was a pirate or a barmaid or something.
Yeah.
And I think I lived there a couple times, honestly. The first time I went to New Orleans was on a family trip. I was 14 years old. You can't do much in New Orleans at 14, but just, Jackson Square, you see the Mississippi, it's just a sight. So I went back 6 years ago as an adult and was there for about a week, and um, it was different. I walked those streets at 3, 4, 5 a.m. with no fear. It was like I had walked those sidewalks before. I knew where I was going. That was the most uncanny thing, was my sense of direction was spot on. And I had, very interesting experience at the Voodoo Museum, and which conversation for another time. But
I want to hear
and yeah,
them.
and then I went back last year for Mardi Gras, my first Mardi Gras, and I am alive when I am there.
That's cool.
Love it. And not even, people think New Orleans, Mardi Gras, partying, drinking. I did not drink that much. I was sober the whole trip because I went to the Museum of Death. I wanted to take in everything,
Girl, I'm right there with you. Maybe that's how we know each other because when I was not younger, but a young adult, I read The Witching Hour by Anne Rice. And I never had
Mm.
any desire to go to the South. I never, but I read her book, and if you've read her, the way she writes is very vivid. You could see it, you could see it, you could feel it, you could smell it, right? And I was so it was all familiar. Like I'm getting tingles talking about it because I felt like I was there. I'd been there, and I wanted to go there. And then I saw a movie. I think it was Dead Man Walking, where they have the groves of the Spanish moth trees or something. But the movie just started. I'm in the theater with my friend, and I looked at them and I said, "That's New Orleans." And then a few minutes later, it pops up that was where they actually were, and
Mm,
I'd never seen, only from what I read and felt and knew and off of memory, but I was able to actually visibly pinpoint it in the movie. And to this day, I feel an odd calling. It's not as comfortable as maybe you, though. For me, it's kind of uncomfortable.
Mm.
Um, and but I'm very drawn to Haitian, like Creole, like the Creole coloring, the Creole culture, the Creole, like, I'm so drawn to the curly hair and like the cream skin and the bright eyes, and so there's something.
There's I'm strongly pulled there so much that if I ever win the lotto, I am buying a shotgun house in New Orleans. And that's I mean, and a shotgun, I'm not sure if you're familiar with a shotgun, but it's literally you walk in through the front door and they call it a shotgun because you can open up the front door and you can open up the back door and you can shoot a shotgun through the whole entire house and it'll go
I've
straight
seen
through.
those.
I did not
It's
know that.
straight through, right?
Old,
Front door to
very
back
old.
door, you can see straight through. All the rooms are off to the side of the house.
That's great.
But and this might be getting away from generational trauma, but so many people died in New Orleans. New Orleans burned down twice. It was founded by pirates. The energy there is
It's not supposed to be there. It's built on
not supposed to be.
Yes.
sand. It's not
Yes.
even supposed to be there.
Yeah.
It is not.
That's why
And,
Katrina happened. That place, there's something about that place and why a lot of stuff has happened there time and time again.
Well, it was built on the ashes of the dead. So the first time New Orleans burned down, all they did is they collected all the ash, which ashes of people, buildings, everything, and they turned that into cement and rebuilt New Orleans again. It burned down again. They did that again. And then so many people died of yellow fever.
Yeah.
That's another thing too.
It had to do with the levees because I watched a documentary after Katrina. I was very affected by it, and they went into depth explaining how the levees were and how that's why they buried the body so high because it would flood through
They're
there.
below sea level. They're below sea level.
But the storms though would bring in, it would flood. They had
wash in the
levees
bodies.
were set up to drain it properly, so they would pass on all these diseases.
Damn.
And the yellow fever, like
Oh
we said.
my God, I see.
They said they were lucky that Katrina didn't take out the whole state, and that if another one comes and they don't fix these levees the right way, that eventually New Orleans will just go into the sea because of the fact that it's not on anything solid. It's like she was stating,
it's below sea level.
It shouldn't, and so therefore I think maybe faith alone. Of the people there, because they don't ever want to leave. They're so strong. It's so like
it's still there. It's still there. Yeah, that's a testament of it. That's crazy.
I have some pretty amazing New Orleans stories that we'll have to share at a later time. I have some pretty cool stories. I've been on a couple cemetery tours. There's one cemetery I cannot step foot in. I get violently nauseous as soon as we pull up, and I have to. I get it. It's happened twice. Not a coincidence.
We'll have to talk off the podcast because I'm going there in June, and I'll get a couple of days to explore, and I want it to be unique. So I'll have Naomi with me. And I want to do some tours with her, and I want it to be.
Let's go to Mardi Gras next year. Let's make it happen.
Let's do it.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Let's do a podcast.
I've been there twice. Mardi Gras and Halloween. Halloween's better.
I want to go for Halloween. I want to go during Halloween.
It was just character after character in the streets. It's packed.
I bet.
I could imagine.
Big Bird,
and Mardi Gras and Halloween look alike.
Let's do it. Let's do one or the other. Either your birthday is right around there, so maybe we could celebrate your birthday somewhere around there. Both.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's a plan. We'll definitely do that. Sounds fun.
Awesome.
Okay. Done.
And I don't think it really takes away from generational trauma because I think it goes back to what we were saying prior to even the podcast when we were talking about generational trauma in our DNA and how, some people look at generational trauma just from the DNA perspective. But here I was explaining to you the nostalgia, and we all have that nostalgia for things we can't really quite explain. But maybe it's because, we're multidimensional beings living multidimensional realities, and some of those realities are in eras and times that are really close to the surface for us. Whereas if we look at it like layers, right? And here we are, maybe in the middle, And some of these, and not chronological at all, but some of these storylines are closer to this here and now than others. And so, therefore, whatever trauma is happening in those storylines, or are affecting this here and now. Whereas, maybe, and people even say, you have random scars, or like, for example, my lip, I was born with a cleft lip and a cleft palate. And so, I'm blessed because my surgeons did a really good job, but I've seen people, that didn't, and they were really messed up, and I feel blessed. But I look back and wonder what happened in my different timelines or my different history that brought it into this lifetime as a scar, right? And I think it could be anything from being shot in the face to, anything being, hurt in a war, or something of that nature. And I think like that, like here, you probably have your timelines close, where in New Orleans, when you walked at that cemetery, you get nauseous. Well, maybe it's because somebody you were insanely in love with, or a family member that you really cared about was in there, and you just want to vomit because it emotionally impacted you so badly that you're feeling it on this timeline too, and Anthony with, his calling to the like really deep pyramid, cultural tribes, and the symbology, and the religion, and who knows, maybe even sacrifices, because sacrifices were really big.
Yeah.
In Mayan and the Aztec
Very,
culture.
very much so. Yeah. I also have an experience where I astroplaned at 5, specifically down to Mexico.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like just innately. Yeah, like I went and sat in a room, curled up into the fetal position, not knowing why I did it. And I did it several times, but it stopped after like the age of 7. I didn't know why I was doing it. I would just do it.
That's
I would
weird.
control my breathing.
Wow.
I would do like deep breath work. Where did I get this knowledge from? It's because I was so fresh from the last life, whatever it was. But that's why I know the connection to whatever Aztec, Mayan, Olmec, whatever it is. That's very, very real. But
or an ancient culture we don't even know about.
Yeah, exactly. They're discovering a lot of stuff down there that predate. The Olmecs predate the Mayans, but they're finding pyramids and structures that were not built by the Mayans that are in Mexico. So people have been doing that for quite some time down there.
They're doing those new scans of
Yeah,
the
exactly.
Earth, where they can see things that.
Yep.
My mom and I were just watching that. We were literally just watching that a week and a half ago, and yeah, a lot of. I mean, just across the world too. In Thailand or Indonesia, down there, there's like a 25,000-year-old pyramid that predates every pyramid that we in current history know about. So, yeah, it's something deep with pyramid building and worshiping societies. I've definitely been there. My engineering mind or something, I can't help but think maybe there's something relating there, or a common thread between being an artist and engineer and all that stuff. And it's a fascination that I can't explain.
I always question it, because like I don't always vibe with what they're telling me. And I tell my daughter, as she's growing up, I'm like, when you read a book or you're taught something, you never really know, because you weren't there, you didn't experience, you didn't feel it, you will never really know, but if you look at things from a vibrational perspective and what feels right, like we're sitting here talking about what feels right and what our memory of things are, like that's what you follow that path of, hell yes, this is right, this is what I vibe with, and like when we look at did you guys ever watch America Unearthed, I think is what it was called, where he was a geologist and he was proving history wrong from geology.
Yeah.
Right? And so he, even though he wasn't there, he was proving what we were taught is wrong.
Yeah.
And some of the things he was uncovering felt so much hell yes compared to what we were taught. And I'm just like, that goes to show you that we really should be following what feels right.
What you're saying is, and what we're starting to uncover, your first brain is really your stomach. When you need to get the fuck out of somewhere, your stomach is telling you that you're getting sick. Your nausea came on, Mom, at the cemetery. That was your stomach. That wasn't your brain. That wasn't your heart. That was your stomach. And that's the first brain. That's what they talk about. Your immune system is 80% in your stomach. You know, that's
Yep.
that's a thing that responds. Your immune system responds. So you think your brain responds, but really your stomach is what's shooting up to your brain to
Mm-hmm.
create the release of whatever. You know, so if you're
Dantian.
following your innate and what you know, yeah, that is why it probably feels right, because it's coming from the actual brain, the brain that leads your spirit, the brain that leads your being.
What if we
Yeah,
lived life fully? Like, what if
Dantian.
just magically we didn't talk? We don't have a tongue. We don't, we can't communicate vocally, and so we could only live from the perspective of that gut. Like, what if
Right.
if existence only lived from that gut? It
What's
would
the
be
whole
so
thing
much.
about the monks in silence, why they're getting their download, or why they're trying to get their thing that they're trying to attain? It's in silence. They're not speaking. Where is that
They don't
coming
need.
from? Exactly.
Y'all,
Yeah,
That's
they
yeah,
don't need.
you're uncovering it, Lori. Yeah, you're right on it.
the
What were you
Mangus of
gonna say,
Java.
Matt?
The Mangus of Java. Um, John Chang, Mangus of Java. Have y'all heard that? Him?
Mm-mm.
Not sure.
No. Okay.
No.
What is
I
it?
don't.
I read a book about him, a documentary about it, a book about him, and I watched many of his videos. He's the guy that could put his hand over and make fire. You know,
Mm.
he set a newspaper on fire. He split like a banana. He did so many things. In the book, there's more than on the videos. But the video, he actually put his hand over a newspaper and set it on fire. Uh, but
Wow.
I read the book and it was so fast. It's one of the best books. If you want to know about like supernatural, like our channeling our energy and out, that's the book. Mangus of
Yeah, be
Java.
sure to put
I
that
forget the author.
information in our show notes. I'd love to find that resource. I'm sure other
Yeah,
people
Yeah,
will.
absolutely.
Yeah, add
uh,
that to our show notes. Sure.
and in the book, he says the Dantian. You're saying about gut, like you reminded me of that. Like he bring all the energy into there, and then push it out.
Because it's
That
your
just
solar
reminded me of that.
plexus. You know, imagine the sun. The sun's the
Yeah.
strongest thing in the universe.
Hmm.
Your solar
Yeah.
plexus is a reflection of that. So yeah, that makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense.
When
Yeah.
I was young, I would sit in my room and I'd be so mad my mom wanted me to clean my room. That's such a typical kid thing. And I would be sitting in my bed and I would just be imagining with my mind and trying to turn the light switch off,
Mm-hmm.
and like imagining the clothes putting itself away. And then, I always really believed, and this is an outside influence. I always believed that if I really thought it enough, I could make it happen with my mind. And I would have meditations where I would make out this invisible like ball, and move this invisible ball. And well, where did that come from? Like just like you in the finding yourself doing things you can't explain. And so like, Matt was talking about that ball of energy from that part, and I'm thinking energy. I've always known that energy I should be able to. How come I can't? Like
Yeah.
what
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
Bewitched. I mean, come on. Can we
yeah,
just be this?
Tabitha,
Tabitha? I mean, I tried it myself as a little girl. I was like, come on, pick up your toys. I don't want to do it. It's like, ugh. I used to try to think a penny across the table. And I just specifically remember doing this as a little girl. And I'm like, it's gonna
we
move,
should
it's
be
gonna
able
move.
to do it. There's no reason.
I eventually one day we will do that. Our society is going to grow the consciousness exponentially. And I've told this Anthony so many times. We've already grown physically as much as we can. Now this is our conscious or subconscious.
We're
This
cycling
is
back
gonna
to
grow.
it.
This
We're
is
cycling back.
yeah.
I feel like we've been there in this Earth's history maybe multiple times, and
Absolutely.
we lost it, and we're cycling back, and now we're having what everybody's calling, even the Christians are calling it in their own way, an awakening, in their own spiritual way. And there's no right and no wrong about, what's happening. But there's no denying, no matter what your beliefs are, that everything is changing, and it
Right.
is cycling back to a very spiritual, unique time, and people are feeling drawn toward learning gifts and learning, and wanting to know metaphysics and wanting to know divination and wanting to know healing and wanting to know alternative ways of living and wanting to live off the grid, There's so many things we're being drawn to that we weren't raised to think was okay. Even,
Exactly.
Yeah.
I have a really good friend who was raised very anti witch, very anti, anything. And I sat down with her at a party and we're at the pool and I was telling her about my Reiki and I was telling her about my astrology. And she had her aha. And she was telling me how it so was not allowed. Here it is, 5 years later. She's now a Reiki healer. She quit her job.
Wow.
She's doing it out of her home, and she felt freed by just having that conversation.
Mm.
And something that her family denied her whole life that felt right to her.
Just like the gentleman at the office that felt compelled to talk to you. Maybe that's something that you can trigger in people and bring about.
Well, maybe that's something all four of us are
Yeah.
going to be able to trigger in people.
Yeah.
It's like,
Mhm.
let's talk about things people don't want to talk about.
Right.
And maybe the right person will listen and it will free them to feel safe enough to just delve into learning something that somebody told them is taboo or evil or not
Yep.
okay. Or,
Definitely.
like, wake
So
up.
that reminds me of my grandmothers. My maternal grandmother is the one Anthony and I grew up with and we were talking about. My paternal grandmother, those two are both like night and day. So my grandma Diane was the one who was gifted, read cards, taught me everything that I know. Just huge influence in my spiritual journey. My grandma Sandy, my dad's mom, she is diehard Catholic to the point where there's a picture of the Last Supper and Pope John Paul in her house. Church every Sunday, devout Catholic. My grandma Sandy knew that my grandma Diane read cards. And I remember my grandma Sandy telling me when I was young that that was wrong and that's the devil's work. Fast forward 20 years later, and my grandma Sandy is asking me to read her cards.
Oh, I love that.
That's funny.
I love that.
She,
Yeah.
yeah, over the years, and I kind of think like as you get older, maybe, you have a change of heart, change of beliefs, whatever the case may be. Maybe there's something she experienced that changed her thought on her Catholicism. I'm not sure if she had any type of pivotal moment. But she was like, ooh, psychics, ooh, card readings. Like she was all about it, and yeah, so that's kind of like, what I grew up with. And to, your point on your friends, like, they can change. Like I said, it was very taboo, or like you had mentioned, it was taboo, and now it's being embraced. I wish my grandma was alive to
Yeah,
see
man.
how everybody embraces divination, candle. I think she would just be floored because she told me, don't talk about it.
Yeah.
We don't talk about it. We do this for friends and family only. We don't take money.
Even Reiki, so the method of Reiki I was taught was called Ushui.
Oh, that's what I was going to
Ensui?
Usui? Yeah.
Mhm.
And so that is so secret, right? And I'm
Mhm.
thinking, how are you supposed to keep these symbols secret when they're, I get wanting to keep things untainted. I get that because even the word psychic is very tainted. Words create, things to be tainted and take away meaning and change meanings all the time, especially in the English language, right? So I get that, and I get like sacred in the sense that only certain people should be allowed to have that. I get that, but it's like, how is a universe, a society, a world gonna evolve if only, certain people are allowed to understand what's really happening? Like, if we all that's happening with Reiki is that we are opening our crown chakra and we are channeling the violent flame, right? So Matt could go to bed tonight and he could be aware of his crown chakra, and he could imagine violet light flowing into his body and out his hands, and he now knows Reiki. But the symbols help focus, the symbols help awareness, and the symbols are, what's the term I'm looking for when you create a symbol? There's a word, Anthony, you know it.
Is it an
Uh,
intention?
well, you set an intention with a symbol, but there's a word when you a sigil.
A sigil. Yeah.
So I could draw right now a shape.
Mm-hmm.
I could put intent and meaning to it, and I created a sigil, right? So
Hinduism. This is what Hinduism is all based off of. This is how they made Sanskrit. But just like that.
You put intent.
Right. So taking that, you know, that method that they made sacred, okay, you can have it. But now I know that all you did was channel the light, which we all have the power to do. And all we did was focus our intent. We knew it wasn't us. We're just a vessel, right? We're just channeling it through, and we're asking the universe to help us, you know, send that positive energy to assist the other, right?
Mm-hmm.
How could you keep that?
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
You know, and especially in this day and age, because I hope anybody that just heard this goes to bed tonight and puts themselves in a state of calmness, imagines the violet light going through their body, and puts it out to the world. Because if everybody listening to this that did this tonight and went and did that, we would magically be creating such a great vibration.
I agree.
Energetically, that would spread massively, because that's what, you know, that's really its
what
focus.
intention does.
Yeah. Yeah, when I got my Reiki attunement, I saw green, you know, like heart chakra green, like eyes. Yeah, I had my eyes closed, you know, focusing. I was just trying to be in the moment, you know, and absolutely like green, flash of green. And it was like, whoa, you know, like I wanted to get up and move, but I'm like, I can't. I'm like, holy shit, I just got a message. I just need to work on my heart, probably focus on the heart, you know.
I see lots of colors in my mind, but mostly when it's a Reiki state, I see
violet,
royal purple, and so much indigo, and
violet.
Up here,
I see what
the third eye,
I see what
the
I'm
third eye in the crown.
Yeah, so much to say. I'm not going to say it right now.
No,
say it.
No. It's too deep. No. But I'll just say the violet thing. I when I'm driving at night, if I have to focus, like I like put myself in a zone, and I see like the violet, like around, like it's weird. I only see it at night. I don't see it during the day. I see it when I'm driving.
It's
at
the
night.
spectrum. You know, light and energy has a spectrum. It gives off a color. That's what you're seeing.
And it's probably seeing the outside of my aura, like I'm breaking through this little veil. Maybe I don't know. But,
I do mindful art, and what I notice the most when I do coloring of even painting, different times and different periods, I feel, you know, called to different colors, and so I get very intrigued when I'm obsessed with the color, and I don't want to put the color away to shift to another color. And it's like, what's going on within me, you know, that like makes me really like drawn to this color? Is it because it's a piece of my energy that's, you know, like amplified or activated right now, and it's just, you know, because sometimes it's a totally different color or different color patterns, and you know, color is amazing, and how it affects your moods and how you can read, you know, yourself and everything, you know, with color. And all color is energy, and all energy, you know, color, energy, sound, you know, it all comes into, you know, that, you know, and then like red light therapy, you know, I use light therapy. It's amazing, you know, to know that now we can go into a machine and, you know, help us with our physical and internal body based on color, right? We're only using red light therapy, but eventually.
You talking about red light therapy?
Yeah.
Red light therapy? Yeah. What's his name? A comedian talks about it. He advertises it. What's his name? Dang it.
Matt Rife.
JP. I guess last name.
I can't wait till they have a
he has a
machine where you
podcast.
can color.
But yeah, he talks about it a lot on his show. He has an advertisement for it, and he's really funny.
Yeah, so I was talking about that photon machine that generates a frequency and a light output.
machine?
You don't see it, yeah, but it's along the lines where we're getting to the point of understanding, light, sound, energy. There's this whole metaphysical connection through it, and it definitely affects us.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Like
I
we
want to get
use
that.
sound to trick people, like just sound alone. Certain frequencies, they know that if they make that frequency, you could practically kill a person with sound, or with no sound, with deafening. They have those soundproof rooms where there's no sound and people go
Anechoic
crazy in them.
chamber. I've been in an anechoic chamber, and you can hear the blood in your head flowing through it.
Wow.
You don't realize how much the external stimuli is necessary to keep you grounded, because once you start to hear the blood flowing in your head, instant anxiety. You're like, what? You're just not used to it. It's very uncomfortable. Anechoic chambers are crazy. People don't even realize. Good thing Hitler got stopped when he did, because he was about to start putting sound ray machine guns on the battlefield. He was going to start hitting people with huge, massive. Yes,
Damn.
they found frequencies that can instantly make you defecate, hit you right in your stomach, and your bowels would empty, and everything would come out of your body.
So that means we have it
What
now.
were you doing on those?
Huh?
What were you doing? What brought you to that?
I can't remember. I was reading something, and it just was talking about what I think it was deeper into what the scientists and all of the people working in the
I mean,
Third Reich.
You said you were in. Were you in one physically? Like
An anechoic chamber. Yeah, Vintage King. So JBL, the speaker company, has an anechoic chamber in Northridge. So we got to go tour the factory, and at the factory they test the speakers. So we got to sit in the chamber. It's suspension. It's kind of like you're sitting on a trampoline, but a very tight trampoline. Because there's no solid, nothing is solid in there. It's all foam, and then you're suspended in the foam. You don't hear a reflection. Like you snap your finger, and what you normally perceive it as, like when you snap your finger, like as far as you could hold it away, it sounds like it's in the middle of your head. And you can hear there's no reflection.
Weird.
Everything that we're hearing right now is reflection. So bouncing off a wall, and we've been programmed, or we've been accustomed to hearing that for thousands of years. So when you put yourself in something where there's no reflection of sound, it's like being inside this filter right here. You can't hear anything other than what's going on within you.
Sound affects us so much, and we don't realize it, that too could add to generational trauma. Because if you think about sounds over time and how they've changed and evolved, I could imagine that unconsciously affects us as well, especially because it could harm us or it could heal us. Like
I can speak firsthand. Yeah, I ran through a window when I was 13 or 14, cut off, but it was an old window. It wasn't tempered glass. It was like glass from the 60s. So it broke in big old shards. Cut. I got a huge scar on my hand right there from it. Cut half my ear almost off. Gashes all over my knees, but I will never forget the sound of the glass breaking. I will never forget that sound. So every time I hear glass break, it always like a little bit puts my antennas up. But when I hear like a car crash or something in the glass breaking in the car crash, that's where it's like, it's like I'm putting myself in the car crash and I'm not in the car crash type shit. It's crazy. Yeah.
Isn't it crazy that our brain can do that to us? What we hold.
Like I could almost experience it if I heard it and I'm not in the car, and it's weird, absolutely, because it's traumatic.
Yeah, I have this fear of, and I know it has to do with I told you guys I had a cleft lip and I had a cleft palate. So my breathing tubes are not right. And then when I was young, a tube started to grow through the roof of my mouth because of it. And so it left a hole in the roof of my mouth. The tooth was taken out, but so imagine a straw with a hole in it, right?
Yep.
When you breathe. So I can't really drink out of straws properly because of that change. And I'm sure it has a lot to do also with my voice being a different pitch, But my point is that I have a fear. Oh, and I did have a lot of surgeries growing up because of the tubes and the fallopians, and I'm not fallopian, but all the tubes.
Yeah, they're going to your ear. Yeah.
So they would use the old school masks to put me to sleep. You know, the big black masks that have that rubber smell.
Yeah.
You guys ever put those rubber masks on yourself when you were a kid?
Yeah.
You know, like the Halloween masks.
Yep.
You know that smell, that latex, right? That's what those smell like. So to this day, it makes me want to vomit those smells. But my point is that I have a fear of not being able to breathe because of it, but I don't know if that's really it or if that adds to it, because I know I had a past life where I drowned saving a child. You know, like it was a past life regression I had where I was in the Navy and a child was drowning and I saved them, but I drowned and so I have this fear of not being able to breathe.
Your airway.
But at the same time, here I am in a life where I'm messed up here and I have an unconscious, like, you know, when you see those guys go in the caves and they get to those crawl spaces, like, I'm so thinking that they're gonna not be able to breathe.
Yeah.
That's my fear, is not being able to
Claustrophobic.
breathe. No, but I'm not.
Yeah,
though.
not in a. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
It's deeper. It's deeper than this life for sure. That's why.
Yeah, I agree. Do you have anything like that, Carissa, where like you feel like you have a fear that isn't explainable?
Yeah, like, well, it has to do with water, and I think, and I never was afraid of water. Growing up as a child, like we'd go to the beach and I was the first one out there and I was in that ocean all day long. Going underwater, like even in pools. Now as an adult, I can't do it.
You said it. It's a timeline thing.
It's a timeline thing. It is a timeline thing. I know at some point in my life between childhood and adulthood, I will say my 30s maybe, that something in me changed.
Yeah,
I
probably
didn't go to the beach. All of it. I just, you know, I'm like, oh, I'll sit on the sand. You know, I'm uncomfortable now when I go into the ocean. When I get in my pool, I like to sit and lounge. I'm not going underwater. I don't care if it's a pool. I can't do it.
So maybe in a parallel somewhere you drowned and it triggered you at that time, and
I think
so.
Somebody close to you.
Yeah, right. This conversation takes me to a book called Many Lives, Many Masters. Have any of you heard of it?
Yes.
I've heard the title, but I haven't read the book.
I believe I read it. I think I had it.
I read that. Yeah, I read that book. That was one of reading that book also helped bring me into my spirituality. Because, you know, talking about this woman and all of her anxieties. I mean, she couldn't even leave her apartment. She had chronic pain, and just how this psychologist, you know, regressed her. And with every regression, she was relieving a pain or, an anxiety. And I just found that to be so awesome. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, that was my introduction to reincarnation. And then I wanted to know more. And then and then I learned about soulmates and twin flames and soul contracts and all that, and have gotten confirmation of some of my past lives, being one of them in Haiti.
Yeah, that's crazy. We definitely know each other from there.
I think so.
Yeah, why we're here in this life, it's because of a past life, for sure.
Oh yeah. Well, but I'm learning in my own theory, and I'm not taking away from any of your guys' perspectives, but in the way my brain has learned to work, and I thank Dolores Cannon for that trigger, is I don't even want to say past lives anymore, even though I catch myself saying it, because I really feel like we are all the same consciousness experiencing it from a different perspective.
Yeah.
And so I believe that things are, when we consciously have those gut feelings, like we know each other from maybe, Haiti or, whatever, like, or I feel like when I meet people, I know what place in history or time or era or world I may know them from. I feel like it's more of a, not a past life, but a parallel, because maybe we're all just like side by side, experiencing everything all at once, but we're just for
Oh,
that inkling, like right now, this inkling and this here and now inkling I'm experiencing sitting here with you guys having this conversation. But at the same time, if I were to take my awareness away from here and put my
yep.
awareness somewhere else, I would be experiencing somewhere in another timeline, which is why I feel so familiar to the Pirates or so familiar to New Orleans. You know, if I could do a better job at changing my awareness to there and not just the here and now, it could be so magical. And I guess that's what happens when we're in, you know, deep states of hypnosis, or, you know, that different state of brainwave when we are taken back into what we are calling past lives. Is we're just awake in another awareness.
I would argue that that's what I was doing as a child when I was astroplaning, when I was doing the breath work, and like I would say that's exactly what. Yeah,
You were awake
for
in
sure,
another awareness.
for sure. I was just going back to you were saying that time point or that parallel. I would just
Yeah.
because what I felt like going there, I was just a ball of energy, like a floating white ball of energy, you know, but I could see everything in front of me. So what you're saying in going up there, the awareness, shifting my awareness from where I was in that exact moment to where I was like, yeah, you explained it very well.
Maybe that's the key to telekinesis or any other gift, is shifting our awareness to being a part of it instead of separate from it.
I agree. I think
You
that's
know,
why I was doing that. The breathing and all of that was to kind of control the body and remove me from this so focused in this consciousness. Because the best way I could explain it is, you know, when you see that art where they keep zooming in and they keep zooming in and they keep
yeah.
zooming in and keep zooming, that's what it felt like I was doing, but in reverse. So essentially going to it,
You're going far out.
it creates an extreme amount of anxiety, like ridiculous anxiety that I could never experienced on this earth. And I've had bad anxiety, but not like a detrimental anxiety, like being on the edge, like you're about to fall off almost. You know, that's like the best way to describe it. But you know, that going up to that, like you're saying, shifting the awareness. I was just doing it innately by spirit, but yeah, it's, you know, we're so caught up in our day-to-day lives and what's in front of us, it's probably hard for us to get to that state, to do that, to even focus, to work on our telepathic abilities or anything.
Mm-hmm.
So everything then boils down to literally, not even figuratively, everything literally boils down to perspective.
Yeah.
Because self-awareness boils down to our perspective of ourselves. You know, consciousness boils down to perspective of where we're seeing it from. The here and now, wherever we're aware at in that moment, wherever our perspective is. Like, so literally, if you boil everything down as perspective, even if we were to supposedly pass over, we're now, our conscious perspective is now aware of another awareness.
Mhm.
Like, it's
The
just
ultimate
literally
awareness.
boils down to perspective.
We all
Yeah.
go back to
Say that, Matt?
the ultimate awareness. We all go back to. It's the.
But are we really not there?
It's
We're
always
never
there.
not there. We're not aware of it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we gotta go.
that's what
Yeah.
that's exactly what I'm starting to see. Is it's just there. It's because clearly I went there in this life, so that means it must always be there. And I came back to this
Mhm.
one, right? So that would further
Yeah.
anchor that for sure. Absolutely.
So that should take away any of our fear of death. That should take away the
Exactly.
ultimate fear.
You
But all
know,
of our boil down to the lowest common denominator. The lowest common denominator is always fear of death, fear of dying, fear of
absolutely,
not.
absolutely.
So if we know it's just changing perspective,
Mhm.
then
It's
why
just going
should we
back.
fear it?
Yeah.
It's just going back home. It's just going back home.
That's, you know, I got that, and that gave me a lot of solace and peace and understanding death, because as a child I used to be scared of it, but I understood that no, you're just
Me too.
making your return. You're going back to your
Yep.
highest form. You've
Yeah.
you've superseded the physical.
Like-
There's so much limitation with the physical, the flesh. None of that is there in those other dimensions.
We're here experiencing it because maybe there's more to it than we.
That's
Because
yes.
maybe.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You come
Like,
down for the experience. You come here for the experience to learn
Yeah.
without a
Yeah.
doubt. That's why there's love
Yeah.
and there's pain.
Yeah.
That's why there's
And-
the balance and contrast.
And that's why when people, like my mom died, I've told this story, but like, what, she didn't want to come back. She had a daughter. She had like a 9-year-old daughter or 5-year-old daughter, and she was like, "I want to stay here." And the guy that came to her, may have been me because I wasn't born yet, said, "You got to go back. I'm not born yet." But
Maybe.
so she had to, maybe. I've been thinking about that, maybe. But it wasn't her time.
Wow.
And he said, "You got to go back." But she felt like she wanted to stay. She wanted to stay. It was unbelievable amount, unconditional love. That she wanted to stay.
It's amazing.
Well, she had a daughter.
Wow.
Maybe it was you that told her, maybe because you weren't born yet, maybe. But what about those experiences where people know without knowing that they're going to die? Like, for example, there is a story that I read in a book years ago about a little girl who was maybe somewhere between 4 and 6, like really young, but aware, right? She went to each member of her family. And that day, that morning, that day, and was like, said goodbye. I love you, goodbye. I love you, goodbye. Went to everybody. And nobody could really quite understand, but they hugged her. Oh, I love you too, but they didn't quite get it. But that night at dinner, she choked on a chicken bone and died.
Wow.
How did she know to say goodbye and I love you to everybody?
Because she was so fresh from the last experience. She's probably super in tune with her higher self and awareness, and probably knew that was just the experience she came down for in this one, or in that one.
And the people dying, and you'll learn a lot, I'm sure, about this from your first-hand experience, Chris, as you go through your doula. But when my mother was in hospice, I don't think she was here consciously anymore at all. I think her body was just still alive. And I read the book that night. They give you this book in hospice, and it explains all the stages of death, prior to dying. It's like specifically for elderly or those dying of diseases. And you get to a stage where you aren't really here anymore, and it's like 3 months, and you go through like this depression. And then, next thing you know, you're kind of just not here. You're kind of in and out all the time. But my mom, I stayed with her all that night in hospice. And I didn't feel like she was there. I didn't. And then the next day in the morning, I had to go get my daughter and take her to school. And in the meantime, my stepdad and my stepbrother came, and they sat with her and they called me. And they were only there for maybe 30 minutes, and I showed up. And I sat down, and the three of us are talking, and she's still there, and they checked, they kept checking her breathing. And we're talking, and we're like, we haven't heard her for a while. And we had somebody check, and sure enough, she had passed while we were all sitting there together. She waited for me to get there, but yet she wasn't in her body, but she was there.
She was there, but she wasn't. Yeah.
But the amazing thing is that unconsciously, in some physiological consciousness level, she had checked out. She had not really been, but we didn't see any of the signs of it.
Yeah, exactly. Physically couldn't tell.
But she sort of already had reached that other place.
Yeah, I watched that with my cousin's mom. My cousin's mom died of cancer in 2010. And I watched him go through all the steps of hospice and visiting his mom with him. And it was definitely a person that's like her. She can't suppress her spirit. She can't suppress herself. Like, she's just in the room. Priscilla's in the room. She's talking. You can't. She is her.
Yeah.
And I could see, and there was even through battling cancer, like still that fight and everything's still in her. But it got to a point where it was like, she's not here. Like she was already like and it happened quick. It went from like her being in the bed normal, still talking, to like maybe within a week and a half, like, I'm just going to go lay down. I'm going to go lay down. But then she went.
How long was it? So they said like 3 months when they started to check out. So like you said, the presence, you could feel the presence.
It was probably like 4 months. It was probably like 4 months. At 4 months before she passed away, she was still up, running around, smoking cigarettes, talking with everybody. 2 months later, she is like in bed. And like, that is where 2 months later, and she had only maybe had like 3.5 weeks from there left. Yeah.
So that happened to me exactly the same way. Exactly. We took my mom to Costco, her favorite place. She used to work there. She left there because of the cancer. But I took her there in her wheelchair and brought her home. But after we got home, she laid in bed, and she was in there, the bed, forever. And I sat there next to her, and I remember thinking in my mind, she's not here. even though we had just went to Costco, I knew she wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
I knew, and I just stayed with her anyways. And I went home. And the next day I got up and I went to work, and I'm sitting at work, and I get there really early, and she calls me on the phone, and I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
what's wrong? I got really worried. And she's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm okay, Mom. What's going on?" And she couldn't differentiate reality.
Mm-hmm.
She was thinking
Yeah.
something happened to me because I sat with her the day before, but she was already in another reality.
Yeah,
Where I
definitely.
was still alive and she was still alive and everything was okay. And she called me to check on me. And I sat there worried about her, but she wasn't with me. She was in
Mm-hmm.
that other
She was
reality.
already crossing over.
A month later, she passed away.
Yep.
Yeah, and it was like, wow, that was like, I remember thinking in the moment that was an experience that a reality experience, a timeline experience where she had left. She wasn't really here, but she was still experiencing life with me.
Yeah.
And then there she was. So in some other timeline, she's still alive.
Definitely.
Hmm?
So your friend, I was thinking that, and you're talking about it. 1 minute she's with you, but was she?
Yeah.
She was existing, but was she?
Yeah, definitely, absolutely. Like now looking back on it, for sure. Yeah, it's you are making your exit. You know what's going. Your highest self knows what's going on, and it's working to get you over there in the manner, however it needs to unfold, however you set out for it to be. That's what that is.
Yeah. I'm interested as you go through this experience, Chris, to hear some of your stories and like what we can learn from those experiences.
Yeah. So just a quick story share. My grandma and I, well, maybe my grandma had known before this moment, but in this moment, we knew together that she was going to pass. We knew, I mean, she did pass suddenly. I think I had mentioned she died 10 days after my grandfather. But when we knew she was going to go was when I was able to read her cards. She was teaching me how to read cards. And we had been reading them for a couple months already. And she just told me, my grandfather was very sick. My grandmother was also taking care of an elderly woman as well, who was also sick in the hospital. So we're reading the cards to see if we're going to have some deaths, right? And I read her cards, and I'll never forget the look that we gave each other, because we knew in that moment that she was weak. That her energy, her strength, her soul, her essence was weak, because nobody has ever been able to read her cards, because she's just that strong. No people, and I can speak to this because when she was first teaching me, I tried to read her cards and I had the biggest mind block ever. I looked at the cards and I all of a sudden forgot what they meant. It was the most it was a fascinating experience, but also like, oh my God, to be in the presence of somebody who is just that strong, powerful. I'm looking at the card. She goes, "You can't do it, can you?" I go, "No, Grandma. It's like I forget what they mean. I've got the biggest mind block." And she goes, "Yeah, I know. I'm the only one who can read my cards. Nobody's ever been able to do it." But that night, she was in the kitchen. She might have been cooking or doing dishes, and I was sitting at the kitchen table, and I think we had just gotten home from visiting my grandfather in the hospital, and then the woman she used to take care of, they were in the same hospital, so we did our rounds, and so I was able to read them, and we both looked at each other, and we knew. I knew in that moment, and I think she did too.
What did she like? Well, was there a conversation around it?
No, it was a knowing. It was just, we knew it without even saying a word. We just looked at each other and we knew. I knew.
Yeah.
But I would go as far as to say that we both knew in that moment that she was not going to be around much longer. It's just a matter of when.
Yeah.
And I think it was like a month.
And it was
It
a
was a
matter
month
of
and a half.
when.
It was probably about a month later that she
Yeah.
passed away. Yeah.
Aw.
Yeah.
And how long ago was this?
2018. No. I'm sorry. 2008.
2008.
2018.
Yeah.
2008. February 7th, my grandfather died. February 17th, my grandmother died.
Yeah.
Yeah.
2008.
That's just, and then I'm sure kind of like what your son said about feeling people's presence, that some people did have such a strong presence that we do know when they're there. Yeah. One time years ago, I had a good friend who now has since passed, and I was early in my years of learning about energy and whatnot, and I've been taking Reiki, and that's when I first started channeling, and I was home in my first apartment alone, and I had this overwhelming calling to her. And I called her, and she was at home drunk, crying about her dad who had passed away. And I was like, well, I really feel like he's telling me to tell you that he's here and everything's okay. And that's when I learned her story. And it felt like it was supposed to happen. Like I just knew, like, you know, and his presence was there, and there was a being within her realm that could get that message to her, you know, and if we could all just open up to that, there's so much we could learn from the other side, you know, in our existence, if we're just open up to, you know, those that are still, well, they're never really gone because they're just, again, a consciousness aware in another reality. But they're here, you know, any of them that we want to talk to or channel or get in touch with, they, you know, we just gotta be open.
I think that's why she was so strong, is because she was very aware of that and very in tune with doing that. Very, very, very much so.
Yeah.
Do you get that, Carissa? Do you ever feel your grandma?
I get messages. I get signs.
You didn't just see my screen blinking when you were talking about her?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was the white light. It was white light.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. She was phenomenal. Powerful, phenomenal. She could shake your hand and tell you everything about you.
Oh.
You know, she was just extraordinary. And I'm so blessed that, you know, I got to, you know, I mean, we've been together in a couple realities, past lives, whatever the case may be, but she's been my mother before a couple times. And she was in this life, you know, so I'm very, very proud to be a part of her soul family, you know. But yeah, I've got a lot of stories about Grandma Diane, and, you know, while she was alive and even afterwards, you know.
I can smell the insulin bottle right now coming out of the fridge. You know, the cold smell.
Oh my God.
You know, the cold smell of insulin coming out of the fridge. I'm getting that right now. She's probably with us.
She had diabetes. Yeah. She had diabetes, and I used to give her insulin shots. She could never give them to herself. She could not do it. So in the morning, I lived next door to her. Myself, Anthony, and my younger sister, we lived next door. And get up in the morning, go give her shot. We'd go about our day. We'd get home, go give her evening shot. So yeah, wow.
I haven't smelled that smell in a long time. It was very specific.
I completely forgot about it.
And I wasn't trying to fish for it. It just came into my nose.
Oh yeah, it just came. Yeah, because you're open to it. Yeah.
I smell her perfume. I smell her perfume. Conversations that we've had. You know, like oh gosh.
That was her confirming, because, you know, she was that type of person where she would get a confirmation. But she wouldn't talk about it. She would keep it to herself. She paid attention to the signs, but she wouldn't speak about them or be open about it. Not to everybody. That's what that was.
But too, you know, back in the day, because things were so taboo, and even now, you know, people are apprehensive and they do hold back with things that they want to say
I
because
am.
not everybody is open and accepting to things. And like, sometimes I catch myself oversharing, but maybe I'm supposed to overshare, because so many people hold back, and I know I'm guilty of it, especially living in Arizona, coming from California, like you guys, and living in Arizona, and having unique feelings for humans in ways that maybe isn't easily accepted by other people, and not being able to talk about them because you don't know if the person you're trying to talk to is going to be open and accepting, about it and how they're going to respond. But I'm at the point where it's not that I don't care, it's that maybe somebody needs to hear it so that they can be open about something too. It's like that's creating the safe space like I was telling you guys about that we can do here with our our audience, is that creating a space for them to come on and talk about things that they don't feel comfortable talking about, just anywhere, because it's not, and making it normal to just overshare, just say it. Like, don't hold back.
Yeah, a lot of that has to do with the conditioning that we've had from being in group settings or being in work and where, absolutely, when it's the complete opposite. Like, really think about it. Like, we had to contribute as a community fucking 1,000 years ago. We had to talk. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have social media. We had to go coerce. We had to go talk. We had to go intermingle. We've lost a lot of that. But that is where that's where all this type of stuff can be had, where people can
no more family secrets.
Yeah, no.
Right, like no more family secrets.
My grandmother's gift was a family secret. Like, growing up, I knew that my grandmother was special and she did things right. Just my mom's words, right? So I had no idea exactly what made her special. I didn't know what she did. I didn't know she read cards. She learned it from my great grandmother, her mother. So, and I didn't know my great grandma Betty did that. So growing up, it's kind of like, as an adult, I'm like, I'm kind of like I got let in on the family secret that grandma sees ghosts and reads cards and does candle magic, and it was just
very taboo. Like, nobody that I talked with, nobody knew, unless you were super close to us, like Dina only knows about it based off of what I've told her and what you've shared with her, and that's somebody super close and didn't even know, but yeah, that's definitely how it was under the hat. But I get it. Where was this knowledge passed down from? Does this come from a time where people were being exiled and killed and stoned for like, that's a reality too.
Well, I mean, the Haitians had to disguise, hoodoo and voodoo as Catholicism. Like, if you see some of their saints are black.
Yeah.
They had to hide their practices from the Spaniards, so they wouldn't be persecuted. So if you go into like a hoodoo or voodoo store, you'll see a lot of their statues, are black, but they're given other names.
Yeah.
But that was what 1500s. So yeah, I mean, it's been, I don't remember when there was such a thing as, freedom to practice.
Yeah, no.
Freedom never really, not in our era, any of us, or even our parents' era. I don't even know if the last 100 years truly anywhere, in any way, shape, or form, has had any form of freedom.
Indigenous across the globe, that's the only place it's existed. Isolated, desolated groups of people that haven't been influenced by the outside or taken over. They're the only ones that have.
So like a tribe,
Aboriginals, the tribes down in the Amazon.
Yeah, even some of them, they have their own cultural guidelines and barriers to make.
Of course. Oh yeah, like true freedom, like land of the law. Yeah, like the natural state. If you remove everything back, the
Yeah.
natural state where you remove everything that we've created and only what the earth has, that is true freedom. Being able to do whatever and
Yes.
walk the earth. Yeah, no, we experience that when we get wiped out by an asteroid. That's when we get to
Yeah.
experience that.
Let's not pray for that in our lifetime.
I hope
I
not.
don't want to be in that here and now.
No.
I don't want to bring myself to that awareness.
We,
It's not gonna happen.
yeah.
Not yet.
It'll happen, just not here and now.
For
I don't want to do it.
hopefully
I don't wanna
25,000
do it.
years.
Let's do it. I'm happy here. I'm happy not having total freedom right now, if that means an asteroid.
Right.
Just, so.
Oh, yeah. Lori, I don't know if you remember. Oh my gosh, how long ago was this? A couple years ago, 2 years ago? I would be surprised if you remember. Do you remember when, oh my gosh, was it Saturn and Jupiter were going to be so close to each other and we were going to see it? This was a couple years ago. It was Saturn and another planet. I can't remember what other planet that was.
I think you're talking.
I'm not quite sure.
I think that was like a year ago, actually, the beginning of last year.
Was it a year ago, 2 years ago?
It was a year
somewhere
ago.
around there, where Saturn and another planet were going to be very, very close to each other.
You could see them. Yeah, it's when I was in SAC with Aunt Cindy. You could literally see the planets. You know, they were in alignment too, and you normally can't see. You could see it like a star in the sky.
And so were people like worried about like the world ending or something?
I don't. My podcast page just there we go. Now I can see you guys. I don't know what happened. It shifted. So I had this. I had a dream, and I know you refer to this as just existing in another consciousness. So I was having that dream in that consciousness, and it was around the same time that these two planets were going to nearly touch. And I'm standing outside in my front yard, and we can see the planets like right like in our atmosphere. Like we could probably take an airplane to Saturn. It was so I mean, it was phenomenal in my dream. But then Saturn and what was it? Jupiter? Is that Jupiter, Maddie, that you said?
It was one of those. Yeah, they were close.
I think it was Jupiter.
They
I think it was Jupiter.
They actually collided.
Yeah.
The two planets collided, and then it impacted gravity on Earth. I ran inside because I saw the collision immediately, and I'm like, I'm just gonna run in my house and go to my bathroom and shut the door.
Like that's gonna do anything though, but
I don't know. That was just what I did. I ran inside the house, went to the bathroom, shut the door. I'm just, just in like, oh my God, what's going on? I'm sitting on the toilet, and then gravity is just gone. The tile in my bathroom starts lifting up, and everything underneath me just starts lifting up.
That's crazy.
That is.
It was so crazy, and it was like there was more uncertainty than there was fear. But
definitely we're in another awareness.
For sure.
Oh my goodness. I remember it like I just had that dream last night. And I think I messaged you to tell you about it because I think you had posted something about that happening, about those two planets being close together. And that's when you first told me that's probably happening in another reality. That's probably happening in another consciousness. And you kind of explained to me a little bit. And I was like, oh, okay. So.
Yeah, that's amazing. I want to relate similar. So again, back in the day when I was young in the early years, and I started like, I had a period of time where I was, what's the word, lucid dreaming, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
I don't do it now, but I was at a period where it was very just insanely. I have two really good ones to tell you, but this one right here was, I woke up from a dream that was very real, where I was being chased with another person and being shot at, and we jumped in a car, and we're driving in the car, and we're being chased by the police, and it abruptly ended. I abruptly woke up, but I was so not in this world. Like, I was still, my consciousness physically never came all the way back. You ever feel like you're out of your body, where you're not really, well, so I get in my car to go to work, and I'm running late, and I'm speeding because I'm just not really here. I'm not right. And I zig over, and I do an illegal, like, I pass on the right, and I freaking got pulled over. But that whole, like, being chased, like, continued on almost
Wow.
in this reality, because I never really quite left. And I got a ticket, for passing in the right, but I still somehow was being chased. But the other one, this is really trippy. I don't know why I feel compelled to tell you this, Anthony, but I'm going to tell you this one because I feel like somehow maybe I can't really explain it. I had a dream. It wasn't a dream, where I was aware that and I don't see a physical body for me. I'm just like, but I'm aware that I'm something. Having a mental conversation, and I could see the other person, and we have this, like, soul love, like this, like, the real deal, right? But I'm, like, in their head, and we're, like, talking telepathically. We're not together. And something became aware that she could talk to me, almost like she was in a mental hospital or something, where they had control of whatever reality or world she was in. And they're like, oh no, she's doing it. She's like they realized we were, and that connection that her and I had was so, like, the real deal, right? And then bam, black. Like, they realized that she was aware, and they drugged her or they tuned her out, and I'm like, in a reality, right? And I gave myself chills because we were connected, like, almost like I was waking her up. While she was in that reality.
You could have been, like,
and then they're like, but how? And they telepathically could see that I was telepathically talking to her, and they shut her off.
That's crazy. Wherever that was, they were very aware of all of those abilities and what could be done.
Wherever that was, and who's to say that isn't happening here? Who's to say that we aren't somehow invisibly shut off? Like, our consciousness is shut off from being able to do the things that we know we could do. We're talking about it all day here, about how we can do these things with our mind. But who's to say that there's not some sort of invisible filter that somebody else has control over, keeping us from that
it's almost like what we could be led to believe affects our strength within that to break through it. And I think that's part of the collective consciousness, and kind of roots deeper into some other things as to why we're shown things, why we have been led to believe a lot of things too, because it would hinder that strength collectively through all of us. It's like look at how strong we are as beings. It would take an extreme force to suppress that. This is an exact thought that I've had. Like, how do you suppress a human? How do you suppress a spirit? It would take something crazy to do that. You would have to get that thing to believe in itself that it isn't as grand as what it is.
But this physical body probably isn't hard to suppress. The physical body.
No. You can easily do that. Fluoride, a poor diet, sedentary lifestyle. You could do that real quick. But the spirit, the consciousness, I really do believe your spirit sits in the unconscious. You have your conscious, subconscious, unconscious. And, in my experience of going up, that's where it has to sit. That's probably why I was feeling all that anxiety, because you're on the edge going out. So you'd have to do some crazy things to suppress that thing so that it's not working at its full potential or doing what it can. Maybe that's by design. Maybe because we don't know how to fully navigate yet or how to correctly do that. I could see that being part of it. But also, is there something more nefarious there to it? What is that? Like you said, that alternate, that dream, that's crazy that, you were experiencing that and then it got shut off.
And it was insanely real, like more real even than sitting here.
It's because it's real. You don't need us to tell you that it was real. You're already telling us that it was real because you experienced that. That's the reality.
It's almost like this isn't real.
Yeah.
Like, this feels less real, and that could be back to what I just said. It could something even sound wise, like there could be a sound over our world, our earth,
Vibration.
that keeps a
Yeah.
vibration that is keeping us, from feeling
From feeling what's to
reality.
come in. Yeah. That day may come. That day may come where it
Yeah.
boom, and that's when everyone.
The Bible talks about
Yeah.
horns being sounded by angels. Those could just be interdimensional beings sounding a frequency.
Yeah.
Reading the Bible as a 30-year-old with my perception now, I can weed it out and use my intellect to, I don't think that was the message. This definitely sounds like this is what this
Mm-hmm.
could be. Like
Mm-hmm.
why are there horns being sounded? Is that changing the vibration here? Is that changing the frequency? And we've just been led to believe that it's this holy thing, and it's not really that.
Yesterday,
Exactly. It's more scientific.
I was at a store that some of you might have heard before called Henna, and I'm never feeling super called to, but we've been talking lately about sound and frequency, and I'm in this store, this Henna store. It's very, it's a trendy hippie store, right? But there is a handcrafted, like pounded with an actual hammer, Tibetan singing bowl,
Oh.
and it's like the real deal. And I put it on my hand, and I was the only one that could make it work.
Mm-hmm.
And even now that it's home, and everybody's tried it, it's like a vibe, right? It's like it's got to be held a certain way, and you got to hold it, you got to do, and it's a vibe, and it's a really deep sound, and like I spent money I shouldn't have spent. It was a lot of money, I'll admit it, right?
Yeah, they're not cheap.
But
Bulls choose their owners. You don't choose the bulls.
it was like that with crystals. It's like that with
Yeah.
crystals, but it was that, and I'm like, and it was deep, and it was rustic, and it was made by the Tibetan monks. It was from Tibet,
Yeah.
and you could tell it was
Whoa.
pounded. But like when I play it and I hear that, it like makes me feel, and I'm like, sound is so freaking powerful. Maybe there is a sound we can't recognize keeping us fast asleep. Like, what would happen if they shut off, or maybe just turned on a more powerful sound like that, that gives you that vibe?
Well, there's the Schumann resonance. The Earth resonates at 8 hertz.
I went to all my plants and started playing. Hey, you guys like that?
Aw, I love that.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's cool.
Did they give you any background on that bowl, like as far as what chakra it's attached to, what
the tuning,
sound
just
is?
more so the tuning in the key.
I got 2 bowls. One of the bowls I know is a bowl that does have a probably a note and a chakra attached to it. I didn't ask about it. I'm not a fan of labels, and so I didn't really want to, but I was drawn to that one too. But this one, it has a vibe, and the only way I could explain it, because words are the way we communicate, is that it felt fatherly, grandfather, like,
well,
it had a masculine feel, but not. It was just home.
Yeah.
It was like,
well, those tones, solfeggio tones, that's what we're created from. They say that those tones are what we use to create the flesh, to create anything in the physical. It's one of those tones, one of the tones aligned with 7 chakras. The number 7 is completion and creation. So that, you're getting closer back to the original origin. And that's part of the whole thing of coming off of 432 and tuning to 440. You might, that bowl is probably tuned at 432. So if you're getting closer to the origin frequency of everything, your being, your creation, who you are. That's why you're talking about that fatherly, because that's just your origin.
I heard ancestral,
Mm-hmm.
and you said origin.
Mm-hmm.
I heard ancestral.
Yeah.
It feels like a hug. Do you ever, when you hug somebody just right, and like you don't want to let go, and it's just that moment where like, I got you, you got me, I got you. That it's that I got you feeling when you hear it. Like, I just got you. It's you don't have to worry about anything.
Yeah.
I got you.
Security. Yeah, like welcoming home. Yeah.
Cozy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'll have to play it for you guys one day.
Definitely.
It's amazing. Maybe when we do our live, all 4 of us, our live video.
I'll bring mine. We can have a little sound bath healing moment.
Yeah, I was gonna get a flute. I was gonna get like a native style flute because they tune those exactly the same way that the monks tune the bowls. So the indigenous throughout America have tuned their flutes the same way. It originates from Siberia. All shamanism that we see here in North America originally, it's Siberia. That's where it all comes from. They tune those flutes the same way. That's why when you hear it, it hits you in the exact same way because they're tuned to 432 and they're hitting a chakra and it's rebalancing you. It's clearing any blockages at whatever frequency it's hitting you with. So yeah, the earth has a base resonance at 8 hertz. It's very, very low. You can't hear it. What if that 8, what if that shoots up to 9? 9's an extremely spiritual number, and they talk about the resonance of the earth changes with gravitational and electromagnetic fields from the sun.
So there is something foreign out there that is hindering our natural vibration.
It feels like it, look at the themes across everybody in humanity. It would all seem like there's a lot of, if I wrote a 6 on a paper right now and you were in front of me and I put the paper down, you would say that you see 9. I would say that I see 6. Who's wrong? Who's right?
Yeah, neither one of us.
And we're both right. Neither of us are wrong. And I feel like that's the frequency that we're at, not understanding or being able to accept the next person and their perspective. So the entire vibration is going to be off, right?
I'm going to start a conspiracy theory. Right now.
Yeah.
What if this pole cap that they're talking about and the stuff hidden under the ice?
Oh, yeah.
What if what's hidden under the ice over there? What if it is alien, meaning not natural? Or what if it's so ancient, that, it chose to have us start evolution this way. And so it's deafening us, whatever it is, it's deafening us from our natural vibration to have some sort of control, even if it thinks it's for our best good.
Yeah, catalyst. When I look back at all of my monsters and I realize the lessons that I got from the other side of those monsters, I wouldn't have had my breakthroughs. I wouldn't have my enlightenment, So I viewed my monsters, so on, quote unquote, as no longer being my monsters. It's the catalyst. So in the grand scheme of things, if something possessed a higher intellect and knowledge than what I know of right now, because I see this with my son. I wanted my son to walk. I want to pick him up when he falls, but if he doesn't fall, he's never going to learn how to walk. If he doesn't figure out how to do something on his own, he's never going to get it. What if there's something we have to fall? We continually have to fall to get to that state of, because you do it for yourself. My son's picking himself up for himself because he has to do that. You're not relying on me.
Something that's seen us screw up before. We've seen you guys do this before. So here, we're going to numb you at a certain frequency so that we can unconsciously guide you to the exact divine moment when you're all going to just wake up.
Because think about it right now. Everybody in this conversation could handle hearing all these things that we know and that we're talking about. Could George in the middle of Kansas, who's been a devout Christian his entire life and his existence is based on waking up for God and that I woke up today because of Jesus, could he handle that the same way? Is he going to go detrimentally do something? Could he go poison the water? Could he go kill people? So I understand that collectively, that makes a lot of sense to elevate us at a gradual level versus being so fast where something like that, it might not fold or roll out how it needs to.
Yeah. And then there you go with the whole, everything happens for a reason and you might never know what that is. When people get really... So I learned the true meaning of compassion. And basically the true meaning of compassion is to have, not empathy, because empathy, you feel empathy for other people, but compassion is, let's hypothetically say that Matt, experiences something very tragic tomorrow. And here we are all tonight. We're all together. We have our camaraderie. And tomorrow we hear something really bad happened in Matt's life. For me, I'm going to have compassion for Matt to go through that experience, no matter how horrible it was. because he needed to go to that experience, and everything that was connected to that experience is needed to happen. I don't feel sorry for Matt.
Yes.
I don't feel like happy for Matt. I just feel compassion for Matt because it had to happen and it needed to happen in the divine plan.
Exactly.
What does that say, Matt?
Which card was that? That sounds like a tower moment to me.
So really, that's what it boils down to. Like, just
Happiness.
there's no right or wrong. Like you just said, it's supposed to happen.
Happiness.
I'm supposed to believe the way I believe. You're supposed to believe the way you believe. And some of us are supposed to come together and talk about those beliefs in order to change other beliefs, in order to create. It's just a weaved world, a web that's intertwining.
Yeah.
That in its own divine timing will get us exactly where we need to be.
I agree.
And Matt, I really hope nothing happens to you tomorrow.
Right?
Well, thanks.